By ancient law she must marry him, all because he caught her arrow. Escape pod shuddered violently as it breached the atmosphere of the uncharted planet. Warning lights flashed across the console, bathing his sweat-slicked face in crimson. The pod's heat shields were failing and the navigation system had gone completely dark. Come on, you piece of junk, Chase growled, his muscular arms straining against the manual control stick. Just hold together a little longer. The escape pod had been his only option after the research vessel Horizon suffered a catastrophic engine failure. As chief of security, he'd stay behind to ensure the evacuation of all scientific personnel before finally launching his own pod straight into an ion storm that had knocked out most of his systems. Through the viewport, he could see a vast expanse of dense forest and rocky terrain rushing up to meet him. Chase braced himself, muscles tensing beneath his damaged tactical armor. The pauldrons on his shoulders scraped against the seat restraints as he fought to level out the descent. The pod slammed into the planet's surface with bone-jarring force, skidding through underbrush and bouncing off rock formations before finally coming to rest in a small clearing. For several moments Chase remained still, taking inventory of his body. Nothing seemed broken, though his head throbbed, and he could feel warm blood trickling from a cut above his eye. System status, he commanded, voice raspy from the smoke filling the cabin. Life support, critical communications, offline navigation. Offline emergency, beacon active. The pod's AI responded in a monotone voice. Chase unstrapped himself and grabbed the emergency survival pack from beneath his seat. At least the beacon was working. If anyone from the Horizon survived, they might be able to track his position. Until then, he needed to find water and shelter. The pod's door groaned in protest as he forced it open, letting a rush of surprisingly breathable air. Chase took a deep breath, grateful that at least he wouldn't need to rely on his suit's limited oxygen supply. The forest around him was unlike anything he'd seen before. Massive trees with iridescent blue-green leaves towered overhead, while strange fern-like plants carpeted the ground. Well, Nolan, he muttered to himself as he stepped out of the pod, you've really done it this time. The survival pack contained basic necessities: a multi-tool water purifier, emergency rations, a compact thermal blanket, and a standard issue pulse pistol. Not much, but it would have to do. Chase secured the pack to his armor and oriented himself using the position of the system's sun. If there was water nearby, it would likely be at a lower elevation. As he made his way through the dense vegetation, Chase couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Years of military training had honed his instincts to a razor's edge, and right now those instincts were screaming that he wasn't alone. After an hour of careful hiking, he came across a small stream cutting through the rocky terrain. The water was clear, and after testing it with his purifier safe to drink, Chase knelt by the stream, filling his canteen and splashing water on his face to clean away the dried blood. It was then that he heard it, a subtle displacement of air, the faint whistle of something moving very fast. Without conscious thought, his hand shot up, fingers closing around a slender shaft mere inches from his face. An arrow. Someone had just tried to kill him. Chase stared at the arrow in his hand. Its shaft was made of a silvery material he didn't recognize, and the arrowhead gleamed with an unnatural sharpness. His eyes narrowed as he scanned the tree and finally spotting a figure partially concealed behind a massive trunk about 30 yards away. I know you're there, he called out, rising slowly to his feet. I'm not looking for trouble. My ship crashed and I'm just trying to survive. For a long moment there was silence, then with fluid grace a figure stepped out from behind the tree. Chase felt his breath catch in his throat. The being before him was unmistakably female, though clearly not human. Her skin was a flawless snow white, almost luminescent in the dappled sunlight. Long silvery white hair cascaded down her back, framing a face of unearthly beauty. Her eyes, large and almond-shaped, were a pale, almost translucent blue that seemed to glow with an inner light. She was tall, nearly his height, and clad in form-fitting black armor that left little to the imagination, accentuating her perfect figure with its sensual curves, elegant wide hips, and impossibly narrow waist. A quiver of arrows hung at her hip, and she held a bow of the same silvery material as the arrow he'd caught. But what struck Chase most was her expression, a mixture of shocked disbelief and what appeared to be horror, the alien woman said something in a language he couldn't understand her. Melodic voice rising in what sounded like distress, she took a step backward, then another, shaking her head vehemently. I don't understand, Chase said, holding up his hands in what he hoped was a universal gesture of peace. I'm not here to harm you or your people. The woman's eyes fixed on the arrow still clutched in his hand, she pointed at it, then at him, saying something that sounded urgent and dismayed. When Chase didn't respond, she repeated the gesture more emphatically, her distress clearly mounting. The arrow, Chase asked, holding it up. Look, I'm sorry I caught it, but you did shoot it at me. The alien woman's shoulders slumped in defeat. She closed her eyes briefly, then straightened her face, settling into a mask of resignation. With deliberate movements, she slung her bow across her back and approached him, stopping just a few feet away. Up close, her beauty was even more striking. Her features were delicate, yet strong, with high cheekbones and full lips that were currently pressed into a thin line. She extended her hand, palm up, clearly asking for the return of her arrow. Chase hesitated, then placed the arrow in her outstretched hand. I'm Chase Nolan, he said, tapping his chest. Chase, the woman studied him for a moment, then touched her own chest. Laraya, she said, her voice like chimes in a gentle breeze. Before Chase could respond, she reached out and grasped his wrist. Her touch was cool against his skin, her grip surprisingly strong. With her other hand, she raised the arrow between them, pointing first to it, then to him, then to herself, before making a gesture that seemed to link them together. Chase had no idea what she was trying to communicate, but he had a sinking feeling it was significant, very significant. Laya, she repeated, then added what sounded like a title or designation. She gestured again with the arrow, her expression solemn. I'm sorry, Chase said, shaking his head. I don't understand. Laraya sighed, then tugged gently on his wrist, clearly indicating he should follow her. After a moment's hesitation, Chase nodded. He needed allies on this unknown world, and despite the arrow incident, she didn't seem intent on harming him now. As they began walking deeper into the forest, Chase couldn't help but wonder what exactly he'd gotten himself into by catching that arrow. Laya led Chase through the dense forest with silent grace, occasionally glancing back as if to ensure he was still following. Despite her obvious reluctance, she moved with purpose, guiding him along barely visible paths that wound between massive tree trunks and over rocky outcroppings. Thus, after nearly an hour of walking, the forest began to thin, and Chase caught glimpses of structures ahead, dwellings built into and around the enormous trees, connected by graceful bridges and platforms that blended seamlessly with the natural environment. As they approached, figures emerged from the settlement, all female, all with the same snow-white skin and silvery hair as Laraya, though none quite matched her striking beauty. They wore similar armor and varying designs, and all carried weapons, bows, spears, or curved blades that gleamed in the dappled sunlight. The women formed a loose circle around them, murmuring among themselves in their melodic language. Their expressions ranged from curiosity to outright hostility, with many staring at Chase as though he were some dangerous beast. Lara spoke, her voice clear and commanding. She gestured to Chase, then to the arrow she still held, and finally made that same linking motion she'd shown him by the stream. The reaction was immediate: gasps and widened eyes. In a flurry of excited conversation, an older woman stepped forward. Her hair was more silver than white, and her face bore the subtle lines of age. Though she remained strikingly beautiful, she wore more elaborate armor than the others, with intricate patterns etched into the black material and a cloak of shimmering fabric draped over her shoulders. Elder Maris, Laura said, inclining her head respectfully. At least that's what Chase assumed, she said. He recognized the respectful tone and posture. The elder studied Chase with penetrating pale blue eyes, then turned to Lara and spoke at length, her tone questioning. Laroya responded, occasionally pointing to Chase or the arrow, her voice becoming increasingly defensive. Finally, the elder approached Chase directly. She reached out, placing cool fingers on his temples, and closed her eyes in concentration. A strange tingling sensation spread through his head, not unpleasant but definitely alien. When she stepped back, she spoke again, but this time to Chase's astonishment, he understood her words. I am Elder Maris of the Silivari. I have established a temporary neural link so that we may communicate. It will fade by tomorrow's dawn. Chase blinked in surprise. Thank you, he managed. I'm Commander Chase Nolan of The Earth Alliance research vessel Horizon. The elder nodded. Lara tells me you caught her arrow in mid-flight. Is this true? Yes, Chase replied cautiously. It was instinct, I didn't mean any offense. A murmur ran through the gathered women. Elder Maris raised a hand for silence. No offense is taken, Commander, but you must understand the significance of what has occurred. She gestured to Laraya, who stood rigidly at her side. Laraya is one of our most skilled huntresses. For a warrior to catch her arrow is no small feat according to our most sacred traditions, and dating back to the dawn of our civilization. Such an act forms an unbreakable bond. Chase frowned. What kind of bond? A mating bond, the elder replied simply. By catching her arrow you have proven yourself her equal in skill and reflexes, when our traditions dictate that you are now bound to enter a union and produce offspring. Chase stared at her, certain he had misunderstood. A mating bond? You mean marriage? That is your term. Yes. Elder Mari's expression remained impassive. The tradition is absolute. It ensures that our people remain strong, that only the most worthy genes are passed to the next generation. Now Chase understood Lara's horror. When he caught the arrow, she hadn't expected a clumsy off-worlder to possess such reflexes. With all due respect, he began carefully, I'm not one of your people. Surely your traditions don't apply to the traditions apply to all. Elder Maris interrupted firmly. They are sacred and absolute. To break them would bring dishonor to Laraya and her lineage for generations to come. Chase glanced at Laya, who was staring fixedly at the ground, her posture rigid with tension. He felt a pang of sympathy for her. Clearly she wanted this situation even less than he did. What if I refuse? He asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. The Ellers's eyes hardened. Then you would be declaring Laya unworthy, a grave insult that could only be answered with blood. Her family would be honor-bound to seek retribution. Great. So his options were forced marriage or a blood feud with an entire clan of warrior women. Just perfect. I need time to think, Chase said, trying to keep his voice level. This is a lot to process. Elder Maris studied him for a moment, then nodded. You will be given quarters in our settlement. You have until the rising of the third moon to give your answer. She turned to one of the younger women. Alara, show our guest to the visitor's dwelling. As the crowd began to disperse, Laraya finally looked up, meeting Chase's gaze. Her pale blue eyes were filled with a mixture of resignation and defiance. Without a word, she turned and walked away, her back straight and her head held high. The younger woman, Alara, approached Chase with obvious caution. This way, off-worlder, she said, her voice carrying the same melodic quality as the others, though tinged with weariness. As Chase followed her through the settlement, he couldn't help but marvel at the silver architecture. The dwellings were built with a perfect balance of function and beauty, incorporating living trees and natural rock formations into their design. Bridges of woven vines connected platforms at various heights, and glowing crystals provided soft illumination. As the day began to fade, the visitor's dwelling was a simple but comfortable structure, and to build into the hollow of a massive tree trunk. Inside, he found a sleeping platform covered with soft furs, a basin of clear water, and a small table bearing fruits and what appeared to be bread. The communal meal will be at moonrise, Ara informed him stiffly. Someone will come for you then. Without waiting for a response, she turned and left, closing the door firmly behind her. Alone at last, Chase sank onto the sleeping platform and ran a hand through his dark tasseled hair. How had a simple crash landing turned into this forced marriage to an alien huntress? Because of some ancient tradition. He thought of Laraya's face, her obvious dismay when he caught the arrow, her rigid posture. As the elder explained the situation, she clearly wanted no part of this arrangement either. Perhaps there was a way they could work together to find a solution that wouldn't end with either of them dead or unhappily bound. As the light outside dimmed, Chase removed his damaged armor. Wincing at the bruises beneath, he used the water in the basin to clean himself as best he could, then sampled the alien food cautiously. To his surprise, it was delicious, the fruit sweet and tangy, the bread nutty and satisfying. Just as he finished eating, a soft knock came at the door. Chase tensed, then called, "Come in." The door opened to reveal Laraya herself, standing rigidly in the doorway. She had changed from her hunting armor into a flowing garment of silver blue fabric that complemented her pale coloring. Despite The circumstances Chase couldn't help but notice how the dress accentuated her perfect figure. It is time for the communal meal, she said, her voice cool and distant. The elders wish to meet you properly. Chase nodded, rising to his feet. Laria, about this situation. There is nothing to discuss, she interrupted, her pale eyes flashing. The tradition is absolute. I do not like it any more than you do. Off-worlder, but neither of us has a choice in the matter. There is always a choice, Chase replied quietly. Laria's expression softened slightly. Not in this. Come, they are waiting. As Chase followed her out into the gathering darkness, he couldn't help but wonder if there might be more to this tradition than he understood, and despite everything, he found himself intrigued by the proud, beautiful huntress who was now according to alien custom his betrothed. The communal feast was held in a vast clearing at the heart of the settlement. Massive tables carved from single pieces of wood were arranged in concentric circles around a central fire pit where several large animals were roasting on spits. Glowing crystals, suspended from the branches overhead, bathed the scene in soft multicolored light. As Chase followed Laria into the clearing, conversations hushed and all eyes turned toward them. The silvery women, hundreds of them, stared at him with expressions ranging from curiosity to outright hostility. Chase kept his posture relaxed but alert, years of diplomatic missions having taught him the value of appearing confident without seeming aggressive. Elder Maris beckoned them to the innermost circle, where several older Silvari sat on ornately carved chairs. Laria led Chase to two empty seats and gestured for him to sit beside her. The human will join us at the high table, Elder Maris announced in her clear, commanding voice. He has caught the arrow of law, first huntress of the Moonlight clan, and according to our sacred traditions, they are to be joined in the bonding ceremony at the rising of the third moon. A murmur ran through the gathering, not entirely approving. Chase noted. He glanced at Laria, who sat rigidly beside him, her eyes fixed on the table before her. The feast began with a ritual that involved each person taking a small sip from a communal cup of glowing blue liquid. When it came to Chase, he hesitated only briefly before drinking. The liquid was cool and slightly sweet, with an underlying tang that reminded him of mint. As the food was served, roasted meats, strange fruits, and various dishes he couldn't identify, Chase found himself the subject of intense scrutiny. The elder to his left introduced as our Serena, keeper of histories, leaned toward him. It has been many generations since an off-worlder has sat at our table, she said, her voice creaking with age, and never has one caught the arrow of a first huntress. It was instinct, Chase explained, cutting a piece of the roasted meat. In my position, you learn to react quickly, or die. In what position is that? Asked another elder across the table, her tone skeptical. I'm chief of security on a research vessel, Chase replied. My job is to protect the scientists and crew from potential threats. A warrior, then. Serena nodded approvingly. That explains your reflexes. Perhaps the goddess guided Laria's arrow to you specifically. Beside him, Lara made a small sound that might have been disagreement, but she said nothing. As the meal progressed, Chase learned more about the Sylv. They were a matriarchal society, organized into clans based on lineage and skill. The Moonlight clan, too, to which La belonged, was one of the most prestigious, known for producing the finest huntresses and warriors. Our traditions have kept us strong for millennia, Elder Maris explained, her pale eyes fixed on Chase. The arrow kitchening bond ensures that only the most worthy males father our children. And where are these males? Chase asked, having noticed that the gathering was exclusively female. A brief silence fell over the table. Finally, Serena answered. The males of our species are different from you. They are smaller, gentler, suited to nurturing and domestic tasks. They remain in the inner sanctums, caring for the young and tending to household duties. Chase processed this information carefully. So your society is completely female-dominated. It is the natural order, Elder Maris stated firmly. The females hunt, protect, and lead. The males nurture and support. Each fulfills their purpose according to their nature. Chase glanced at Laria, who was still silent beside him. He wondered what she was thinking behind that mask of cool indifference. As the meal continued, he became aware of a commotion at the edge of the clearing. A group of silvery warriors entered, escorting a tall, muscular male of their species, the first Chase had seen. Unlike The descriptions he just heard this male was nearly as tall as the females, with broader shoulders and a commanding presence that seemed at odds with Serena's description. He wore armor similar to the huntress's but more ornate, with symbols etched in silver across the chest. His white hair was pulled back in a tight braid, and his pale eyes scanned the gathering until they locked onto Chase with unmistakable hostility. "Alan," Laura whispered, speaking directly to Chase for the first time since they'd arrived at the feast. War leader of the Donklin, the male Silvari strode purposefully toward the high table, the warriors escorting him. Struggling to keep pace, he stopped before Elder Maris and bowed deeply, though his eyes never left Chase. "Honored elder," he said, his voice deeper than the female's but with the same melodic quality. "I have come as soon as I received word. Surely this aberration cannot be allowed to stand." Elder Maris regarded him coolly. "War leader Thalen, your presence was not requested at this gathering." "With respect, elder, this concerns all Silvari," Thalen replied, straightening. "The sacred traditions speak of a worthy warrior catching a huntress's arrow, not an alien creature who stumbled upon our world by chance." Murmurs of agreement rippled through parts of the gathering. Chase remained silent, watching the dynamics play out beside him. Laria had gone even more rigid, if that was possible. "The traditions do not specify race or origin." Elder Maris countered, "only skill and worthiness." The off-worlder caught Elra's arrow fairly. Thalen's pale eyes narrowed. "First huntress Laria was promised to me. We have been negotiating the union for a full cycle of seasons. Her skills complement mine. Our offspring would strengthen both clans." Chase thought, "Now we get to the heart of it. Nothing was finalized," some Elder Mar said firmly, "and the arrow-catching bond supersedes all negotiations. You know this." Felon, the war leader's jaw clenched. "Then I invoke the right of challenge," he declared, his voice ringing out across the suddenly silent clearing. "As is my right when an outsider claims a bond with a high-ranking Silver Eye." Elder Maris sighed, looking suddenly tired. "That is indeed your right," she acknowledged. "Do you accept the consequences if you fail?" "I do," Tylan said without hesitation. The elder turned to Chase. "Commander Nolan, war leader Thalen has invoked the right of challenge. According to our traditions, he may contest your claim to the bond with law through ritual combat." Chase kept his expression neutral. "And if I refuse, the bond would be nullified," Elder Maris explained, "but you would be declared unworthy and banished from our territory. Given the predators that roam the outer forests, that would likely mean your death. Perfect another no-win situation, and if I accept and win, then your bond with Laria would be confirmed beyond any further challenge, and you would be granted full status within our society." Chase glanced at La, who was staring at the table, her face unreadable. "And what does Lara want?" he asked quietly. A ripple of surprise went around through the gathering. Even Elder Maris looked taken back by the question. "The first huntress's desires are not relevant to the tradition," Phelan said dismissively. "The arrow bond and the right of challenge are sacred. Everything is about your sacred traditions," Chase observed, keeping his tone neutral. "But traditions should serve the people, not the other way around." Outrage gasps came from around the table. Elder Maris' expression hardened. "You speak of matters you do not understand. Off-worlder, our traditions have preserved our society for millennia." Chase nodded slowly. "I meant no disrespect," he said, though he wasn't entirely sincere. "I accept the challenge." Phelan smiled coldly. "The challenge will take place tomorrow at midday," he declared. 3 trials of skill, strength, and cunning. "Prepare yourself, alien, for you face a warrior born and trained in the ancient ways of the Silvari." With that he bowed again to Elder Maris and strode from the clearing, his escort hurrying after him as conversations erupted around them. Laria finally turned to Chase. "You should not have accepted," she said quietly. "Thalen is our greatest warrior. After me, he has never lost a challenge." "There's a first time for everything," Chase replied with a confidence he didn't entirely feel. "Besides, my options were limited." Laria studied him, her pale eyes searching his face. "You are either very brave or very foolish, Chase Nolan. I've been called both," he admitted with a slight smile. Often in the same breath, for the first time, a hint of amusement flickered across Laya's perfect features. "You should know that Thalen will not fight fairly. He has too much pride to lose to an off-worlder." "I figured as much," Chase said, taking a sip from his cup. "Any advice?" Lariah hesitated, then leaned closer, lowering her voice. The first trial will test marksmanship. Tylan is skilled, but tends to rush his final shot. The second trial tests strength. He will try to exhaust you early, and the third she pause. The third trial is different, each time designed by the elders to test adaptability and cunning. Chase raised an eyebrow. You're helping me. We thought you didn't want this bond. I don't, Laro said bluntly, but I want to be made even less. He is cruel and seeks only to use my status to elevate his own. Before Chase could respond, Elder Mari's rose, signaling the end of the feast. Tomorrow we witness the challenge, she announced. Until then, let us honor our traditions with the twilight dance. As the gathering began to disperse, rearranging itself for what appeared to be a ceremonial dance, Lariah stood. I must participate, she said. You should rest. Tomorrow will test you in ways you cannot imagine. Chase watched her walk away, her silver blue dress flowing around her like water. Despite the circumstances, he couldn't help but admire her grace and strength. She was a warrior like him, caught in a web of tradition in politics, not of her making. As the haunting music of bone flutes and string instruments filled the clearing, Chase made his way back to his quarters, his mind racing with plans for the coming challenge. He had faced worse odds before and survived. Tomorrow would be no different, he hoped, and Chase lay awake on the sleeping platform, staring up at the curved ceiling of his tree dwelling. Despite his exhaustion, sleep eluded him. His mind kept replaying the events of the day, the crash, the arrow, the revelation of the bond, and now the challenge that awaited him tomorrow. He had faced combat before, both in training and in real-world situations. The Earth Alliance didn't send unprepared officers into space, but fighting an alien warrior on his home turf, according to rules Chase didn't fully understand, that was a different matter entirely. In a soft sound outside his door pulled him from his thoughts. Chase tensed, reaching for the pulse pistol he'd kept within arm's reach. Years of security work had taught him to never be completely unprepared. Commander Nolan, the voice was barely above a whisper. May I enter? Lariah. Chase relaxed slightly but kept the pistol close. Come in, he called softly. The door opened silently and Leah slipped inside. She had changed from her formal attire back into a more practical outfit, fitted black pants and a sleeveless tunic that left her arms bare. Her silver-white hair was braided tightly against her scalp, emphasizing the elegant lines of her face. You should be sleeping, she said, her pale eyes taking in his alert posture and the weapon near his hand. The trials begin at midday. Sleep isn't coming easily tonight, Chase replied, sitting up. I'm guessing you're having the same problem. Lariah nodded, moving further into the room. She carried a small bundle wrapped in leaves, which she placed on the table. I brought you something that might help, herbs that promote restful sleep and clear thinking. And this, she unwrapped the bundle to reveal a curved dagger with a handle of polished bone. A secondary weapon is permitted in the trials. This is better balanced for a human hand than our standard blades. Chase studied her carefully. Why are you helping me? Lariah's expression remained guarded, but something flickered in her eyes. Uncertainty perhaps, or internal conflict. I told you at the feast I have no desire to be bound to Thalen, but you have no desire to be bound to me either, Chase pointed out. No, she admitted frankly. But you are different. You asked what I wanted. No Sylvmale would ever consider such a question relevant. She moved to the window, looking out at the 3 moons rising over the forest, one full and bright, one a crescent, and the third smaller than the others, just beginning to appear on the horizon. Our society has not always been as it is now, she said softly, almost to herself. The histories tell of a time when males and females were equals, partners in all things, but that changed after the Great Calamity, when our numbers were decimated and survival became paramount. Chase remained silent, sensing she needed to speak. The females, being naturally stronger and more numerous, took on the roles of hunters and protectors. The males, fewer in number, became responsible for nurturing the young and maintaining our settlements. Leah turned back to face him. Over generations, this division became more pronounced both physically and socially. Males, like who exhibit the warrior traits usually seen in females, are rare and highly valued for breeding, but not by you, Chase observed. Lariah's mouth tightened. Thalen believes in the absolute superiority of females over males. He would use our union to gain power, to push for even stricter divisions between the sexes, and he is not alone in these views. And you Disagree, I believe in strength, Laura said firmly, but strength comes in many forms. My father taught me that before he died. Chase raised an eyebrow. Your father, I thought males weren't involved in raising children. My situation was unusual, Laria explained. My mother died in a hunting accident when I was young. My father received special dispensation to raise me until I was old enough to join the huntress training. A shadow passed over her face. He was different, thoughtful, questioning. He taught me to think beyond our traditions, to see their purpose, rather than simply following them blindly. He sounds like a wise man, Chase said quietly. Laura nodded, a hint of sadness in her eyes. He died last season. Some say it was an accident, but you don't believe that. Chase finished for her. Thalen became war leader shortly after, and suddenly, he was very interested in forming a bond with me. Her pale eyes hardened. The timing was convenient. Chase absorbed this information, the pieces falling into place. So this isn't just about tradition. It's politics. Everything is politic, Lois said with a hint of bitterness. The arrow bond, the challenge, all of it serves someone's purpose. And what purpose do you serve? Laura, Chase asked gently. She looked at him sharply as if surprised by the question. I serve my clan, as I have been trained to do since childhood. That's not what I asked, Chase said. What do you want for yourself? Leah stared at him for a long moment, then turned back to the window. What I want doesn't matter, she said finally. The traditions are absolute. You keep saying that, Chase observed, but I don't think you believe it any more than I do. A tense silence fell between them. Finally, Lara spoke again, her voice barely audible. What I want is freedom to hunt, to explore, to make my own choices. She looked over her shoulder at him. Things I suspect you understand well, Commander Nolan. Chase nodded slowly. I do. He rose from the sleeping platform and moved to stand beside her at the window. So we're both trapped by circumstances beyond our control. The question is, what do we do about it? Laria turned to face him, fully studying him with those penetrating pale eyes. Tomorrow you fight, and you win, and then one step at a time. Off-worlder, she said, a hint of her earlier coolness returning. First survived the challenge. Chase picked up the dagger she had brought, testing its weight and balance. It was indeed well crafted, the blade sharp enough to slice through the air with barely a whisper. Thank you for this, he said, and for the information. Laura nodded. Once then moved toward the door. The first trial begins at High Sun. Elder Serena will come for you. She paused, her hand on the door. Rest, Chase. Nolan, you will need your strength. After she left, Chase returned to the sleeping platform, the dagger beside him. He brewed a small amount of the herbs Lara had brought, inhaling the calming aroma that reminded him of lavender and chamomile. As he sipped the warm liquid, he considered what he had learned. This wasn't just about an accidental bond or an alien tradition. There were deeper currents at work, political machinations, power struggles, and perhaps even murder, and at the center of it all was Lara, a woman caught between duty and desire, tradition and freedom. Tomorrow he would fight, not just for his survival but for hers as well. With that thought, Chase finally drifted into a deep, dreamless sleep. The morning dawned, clear and bright, sunlight filtering through the canopy to dapple the forest floor with golden patches. Chase woke feeling surprisingly refreshed. The herbal tea Laria had provided having done its work well. He performed a series of stretches and exercises to loosen his muscles and focus his mind, a routine that had served him well through years of military service. As promised, Elder Serena arrived as the sun reached its zenith. The ancient Sylve regarded him with curious eyes as he finished securing the curved dagger to his belt. You slept well, she asked, her voice creaking like old branches in the wind. Well enough, Chase replied, checking the charge on his pulse pistol before holstering it. Good. The first trial awaits. The elder led him through the settlement to a large clearing where a substantial crowd had gathered. Wooden platforms had been erected for spectators, and a central area was marked off with glowing stones. At the far end stood a series of targets at varying distances. Fallen was already there, performing an elaborate warm-up routine with a bow. He paused when Chase entered, his pale eyes narrowing with contempt. Elder Mara stood on a raised platform, her silver-white hair gleaming in the sunlight. Beside her stood Laya, dressed in her formal huntress attire, her face an impassive mask. Today, we witness the challenge of right. The elder announced 3 trials will determine the outcome: skill, strength, and cunning the victor will claim the bond with. First huntress Laya, a young sci-fi female, approached carrying 2 bows and quivers of arrows. She presented them to Elder Maris, who examined them carefully before handing one to each contestant. The trial consists of 3 rounds. Elder Serena explained, each more difficult than the last. Fallen stepped to the firing line, first knocking an arrow with practiced ease. The first target was a circular board about 50 paces distant. He drew aim briefly and released. The arrow struck just off center, drawing appreciative murmurs from the crowd. Chase took his position next. He had trained with various weapons during his Earth Alliance service, including traditional bows. During survival courses, he knocked the arrow, drew the string back to his cheek, and focused on the target. Exhaling slowly, he released. The arrow flew true, striking the target slightly closer to center than Phelan had. The second target was smaller and further away, partially obscured by hanging vines. Phelan's arrow sliced through the vines to hit the outer ring of the target. Chase waited for a moment when the vines parted slightly, then released his arrow. It passed through the gap and now struck just inside Phelan's mark. The final target was the most challenging, a small swinging object suspended from a branch nearly 100 paces away, rotating unpredictably in the breeze. Fallen stepped to the line, his posture rigid with determination, just as Lara had predicted. He seemed to grow impatient, releasing his shot a fraction too early. The arrow grazed the edge of the target, causing it to spin wildly, but not striking it cleanly. Chase stepped up to the firing line, studying the now erratically spinning target. He noticed a pattern in its rotation, a brief moment of relative stability before it began another chaotic spin, drawing the bow. Chased the target, waiting patiently for that moment of predictability. Time seemed to slow as he found his rhythm with the target's movement. There, the brief pause. Chase released the arrow. It flew straight and true, striking the target dead center. The crowd erupted in cheers and shouts of disbelief. The first trial goes to Chase. Nolan. Elder Maris declared. The score stands at 1 victory for the off-worlder, none for war leader Thalon. After a brief respite, the second trial began. The clearing had been transformed. A large circular ring, marked out with glowing stones at its center, stood a massive stone pillar at least 10 ft tall and 3 ft in diameter. The second trial tests not just physical strength, but endurance and determination. Elder Maris explained, each contestant must move the stone of ancestors from the center to the outer ring. Chase studied the stone pillar with a sinking feeling. It had to weigh several tons. Moving it would be nearly impossible for a human. Thalon, with his Sylvari strength and larger frame, would have a significant advantage. Begin, Elder Maris commanded. Thalon immediately approached the stone, bracing his shoulder against it and pushing with all his might. The massive pillar shifted slightly, grinding against the earth. Inch by inch, the stone began to move. Chase circled the pillar, studying it from all angles. Direct force wouldn't work for him. He needed leverage. The stone was roughly cylindrical but slightly tapered toward the top, with a smoother surface on one side. Chase removed his outer tunic and laid it on the ground near the stone's base. Then he began gathering smaller rocks from the edge of the clearing. Working quickly, Chase arranged the rocks in a line leading from the stone to the ring's edge, creating a crude track. Using his dagger, he cut several sturdy branches from nearby trees, stripping them to create smooth poles. Then had reached the halfway point, his progress slowing as fatigue set in. Chase positioned his poles as rollers on his makeshift track. Using another branch as a lever, he carefully pried up the edge of the stone pillar just enough to slide his folded tunic underneath, reducing friction. With a controlled push, he guided the massive stone onto the first roller. The crowd gasped as the pillar began to move more easily. Rolling along Chase's improvised track, he quickly moved the rear rollers to the front as the stone passed over them, creating a continuous path. Fallen looked over in disbelief, his concentration broken. The war leader abandoned his direct approach and tried to copy Chase's technique, but in his haste and anger, he positioned his levers incorrectly. The stone he was pushing tilted dangerously before crashing back to the ground. Chase maintained his steady progress, conserving his strength. As he guided the stone pillar along the rollers, the 2 contestants were now neck and neck, each within a few yards of the ring's edge. With a final surge of strength, Chase pushed the stone pillar across the glowing boundary, a split second before Thalon managed the same feat. the second trial goes to Chase Nolan. Elder Maris declared the score. Stands at 2 victories for the off-worlder, none for war leader Thalen. Thalen stood frozen in disbelief, his chest heaving with exertion and rage. The murmurs from the crowd had changed character. What had begun as skepticism toward the human was transforming into admiration. Elder Maris raised her hands once more. The final trial will commence at sunset. The trial of cunning will test not just your minds, but your hearts. As the crowd dispersed, Chase found himself surrounded by young Svari, all talking excitedly about his innovative solution. Thelen stood apart, conferring intensely with several warriors from his clan. His expression dark and his gestures angry. Elder Serena appeared at Chase's side, gently dispersing his admirers. Come, she said, you should rest before the final trial. What exactly is the trial of cunning? Chase asked. As they walked, it is different each time, tailored to test the specific qualities of the contestants. The old Silvari replied, the final trial is always the most dangerous. Fallen knows he cannot afford another loss. He will be desperate, and desperation makes even the most disciplined warrior unpredictable. They reached his dwelling, and Serena paused at the door. Be vigilant, Chase Nolan. Not all contests are won in the arena. With that cryptic warning, she left him to his preparations. The ancient temple rose from the forest floor like a massive stone tree, its weathered surface covered in the spiraling glyphs that glowed faintly in the gathering twilight. The entire silvery population seemed to have gathered around it, their pale faces turned expectantly toward the twin entrances carved into opposite sides of the structure. Elder Mara stood on a raised platform, Law at her side, maintaining her mask of impassivity. Chase approached his designated entrance, acutely aware of the hundreds of eyes following his every move. Ethalen arrived, simultaneously flanked by 2 warriors from his clan. The final trial tests not merely skill or strength but cunning, the elder announced. Within the labyrinth of shadows lies the heart of the goddess. The first to claim it and return it to this platform will be declared victor of the challenge. 2 young Silvari approached, each carrying a small glowing crystal suspended on a chain. They placed these around the contestants' necks. The heart will respond to these resonant stones. Elder Serena explained, they will grow warmer as you approach your goal. With that, a horn sounded, and Chase stepped into the dark entrance of the temple. The passage descended steeply, the walls lined with glowing glyphs providing just enough light to navigate by. After several minutes, the passage opened into a vast underground chamber, a complex maze of stone walls, some reaching to the distant ceiling, others barely waist-high. Chase moved cautiously but steadily, marking his path by scratching small notches in the stone walls. After what felt like an hour, the resonant stone began to warm slightly. He turned down a promising corridor, and froze. Before him lay the body of a silvery warrior, its chest torn open, the flesh around the wound blackened. The warrior had been dead for some time, yet showed no signs of decomposition. More disturbing was the expression of absolute terror frozen on the Silvari's face. A shadow stalker killed, Chase guessed, remembering Laraya's warning about the predators that hunted by sensing body heat and movement. A faint humming sound reached his ears. The sonic emitter Laria had mentioned still functioning despite Fallen's plans. The humming abruptly ceased. Chase froze, listening intently. In the sudden silence, he could hear a soft, rhythmic clicking, like claws on stone, coming from somewhere ahead. Peering carefully around a corner, he saw it, a shadow stalker. The creature was a low-slung predator with 6 limbs ending in razor-sharp claws. Its body covered in overlapping plates of chitin. Its head was eyeless, dominated instead by sensory pits that detected heat and movement. Most disturbing was its circular mouth, ringed with needle-like teeth that continuously rotated like a drill bit. The shadow stalker paused, its head swiving in Chase's direction. It had sensed something. Chase remained perfectly still, controlling his breathing. A distant sound distracted the predator, and it moved away down another passage. Chase needed to mask his thermal signature. He removed his outer tunic and rubbed it against several of the brightest glyphs until the fabric absorbed their luminescence and heat. He then draped it over his shoulders like a cloak, hoping it would confuse the creature's heat-sensing abilities. After navigating several more passages, he emerged into a larger chamber with multiple exits. The resonant stone was now almost hot against his skin. The heart had to be Close, the clicking of claws came from multiple directions. The shadow stalkers were converging on his position. Chase set his nearly depleted pulse pistol to overload, placed it behind a fallen chunk of masonry and activated the countdown. Then, staying low, he began making his way toward a narrow crevice in the far wall. The pistol detonated with a sharp crack and a flash of blue energy. The shadow stalkers converged on the heat and movement, their clicking calls rising to an excited shittering. Chase slipped into the crevice, which opened into a narrow tunnel. The tunnel widened into a small circular chamber. At its center, floating in a beam of ethereal light, was a crystal the size of his fist, the heart of the goddess. It pulsed with an inner radiance, shifting through colors that seemed to include hues he had never seen before. Impressive, alien voice called from the shadows. I didn't expect you to make it this far. The war leader stepped into the light, positioning himself between Chase and the heart. The emitters on your path failed, he continued. Such an unfortunate malfunction, yet here you are still breathing. Is that what this is really about? La Chase asked. Or is it about power, about continuing to enforce traditions that keep your people divided? You know nothing of our ways, Thalen snarled. Our traditions have kept us strong for millennia, like Laraya's father. Chase suggested the one you killed, because he questioned those traditions. A flicker of surprise crossed Valen's face, quickly replaced by cold fury. Tar was a fool who filled La's head with dangerous ideas. His death was necessary. Fallen drew a curved blade and lunged forward with frightening speed. Chase barely managed to dodge, countering with a strike that glanced off Thalen's armor. The two circled each other, Fallen pressing his advantage of reach, strength, and reflexes. A misstep on the uneven floor nearly cost Chase his life as he stumbled, and Thielen's blade slashed across his chest. Blood soaked his tunic, but the wound wasn't fatal. Any last words, alien? Fallen asked, sensing victory. Just one observation, Chase replied calmly. You're so focused on killing me that you've forgotten why we're here. As Thalen glanced toward the heart, Chase lunged for the crystal, his hand closing around it just as Thalen's blade slashed across his back. Pain exploded through his body, but he held on to the heart, which pulsed with blinding light at his touch. A surge of energy coursed through him, washing away the pain. Impossible, Fallen gasped. The heart responds only to the worthy. Maybe worthiness isn't about physical strength or adherence to tradition, Chase said. Maybe it's about the capacity for growth, for change. Thalon charged with a howl of fury, but the crystal pulsed once more, and a wave of energy threw him against the chamber wall. The war leader slumped to the floor, stunned but alive. I'm not going to kill you, Chase said. That's not who I am. When Chase emerged from the temple entrance with a glowing heart, the gathered Sylvie gasped in collective awe. Elder Mari stepped forward, her ancient face astonished. The heart has chosen, she declared. The challenge is complete. Chase Nolan is the victor. Chase placed the heart in Elder Mari's outstretched hands. The traditions have been honored, the elder announced. The bond between First Huntress Law and Chase Nolan is confirmed. Beyond challenge, Thalen emerged from the temple, supported by two warriors. The alien won fairly, he acknowledged bitterly, but no, this change brings chaos, and chaos brings destruction. When our ways crumble, remember this day. As the crowd dispersed, Law guided Chase toward the healer's dwelling. You could have died in there, she said quietly, but I didn't. Chase replied, thanks in part to your warning. As the healers treated his wounds, Elder Serena entered with urgent news. Commander Nolan, your beacon has been answered. A vessel from your people has entered our atmosphere. The horizon. They survived? Chase asked in surprise. The message mentioned a rescue mission for survivors of the research vessel, Serena explained. Law's face had gone still. Your people have come for you, she observed neutrally. You can return to your home. My obligations include the promises I've made here, Chase said, taking her hand. I won't abandon you or what we've started. Your world is not mine. Your people are not mine, Laraya replied uncertainly. Maybe they could be. Chase suggested the Earth Alliance has established peaceful relations with dozens of species. Cultural exchange, trade, mutual defense, all possibilities in us. Laraya asked, what of this bond that neither of us sought? Chase smiled. I'm starting to think that Arrow found exactly who it was meant to find, not because of some mystical tradition, but because sometimes the universe has a sense of humor and wisdom we can't anticipate. For the first time, Laria laughed a sound like silver bells that transformed her face. Perhaps you're right, she conceded, though I still maintain it was an impressive catch, the best mistake I ever made. Chase agreed, squeezing her hand gently. As night fell, the third moon rose above the forest, a small silvery orb that cast a gentle light through the canopy. In the healer's dwelling, a human man and a Silvari woman spoke quietly of possibilities of bridges between worlds, of traditions honored but not enslaved by the arrow had found its mark. After all, not in flesh but in the space between two souls where understanding could take root and grow into something neither had imagined possible. It was just the end.